takes the second rook, he gives the queen. What an incredible fight we've got now. Behold, two of the most shredded and best chess players in the world. They met New Year's Eve in New York for the World Blitz Chess Championship finals, and not only did they make history on the board, but also off it in a shocking turn of events. More on that one later. Let's first check out game one of this incredible match. It opens with pawn to e4 by Jan Nepomniachtchi, and what does he do in response? Magnus Carlsen, pawn to c5, an aggressive Sicilian. The ponies develop into the game, and Jan now develops the bishop with a whoosh. This is the Rossolimo. e6 you can do, or e5. We saw Magnus do it against Hans earlier in the day. I'll link that game at the end, but this time he builds the banana hammock. Jan castles the king. Magnus tucks this one into bed, and after Chewy's favourite move, the Wookiee one, we now see Magnus push that pawn. Looks counterintuitive, leaving this massive hole on d5, killing your own bishop, but you do gain space, and it's dark squared grip versus light squared grip. Epic strategic battle, and Jan now gives up the bishops. Is he really a grandmother or a very naughty boy? Normally you want to hold on to those. Well, this is his point. You shatter the structure, less easy for white to break in future, or black rather, with the pawns. Now this bishop's opened up. This is why Magnus took away from the centre. d3 now played, queen e7, and Jan starts gaining space on the queen side. It's great play. They're in their theory. This pony develops, and after a5 we can see all the queen side pieces stuck on the Etienne back row, but fear not, the position's quite closed. The pawn push is justified. Castles from Magnus. This bishop now develops. The rook hits the open file, or half open file, eyes the enemy queen. c4 is on the way, so that's why Jan sidesteps here, sets up the battery, but Magnus anyway explodes the board with this move, saying you take here, I take here. Black's doing absolutely fine. The discoveries don't matter, so we come back. We didn't see that. Jan instead leans back, puffs out his chest, and he's like, do you even rook lift, bro? As he brings that one into the game. Weird looking move, but top engine move. He's done his homework. Magnus now exchanges the pawn. This one recaptures, and at this moment we can see the all-powerful Sir Stockfishington has white a tiny bit better, but not really. Black's got the bishops, very solid, again in the centre as well with a pawn, so it's roughly level. We see knight h5 from Magnus now played, forgetting his own principle.
Der Springer an dem Rimmer ist ein absolut wie eine Schnitzel.
But he's spinning around into f4, and a great move now for Jan is a6. If b6, the pawn drops. Black does get counterplay there, but it's a different kind of game. Top engine way to go. Instead, we see bishop g5, trying to provoke f6, but Magnus instead blocks with the bishop. Yes, he gives up his bishop pair. Yes, he weakened the dark squares earlier, but that one was kind of staring at its own pawn. And now there's these ideas of going bishop g4 and soon looking to dominate this d4 square. These are the battlegrounds drawn. So queen c5 from Jan to respond to that kind of positional, slow-moving threat. He hits the pawn, asks Magnus to do something with it, and you can hop with knight f4 to counter-attack here. But instead, we see rook e8 passively covering, and it's not the best because it allows Jan to strike with d4, but he doesn't do it. He starts with developing the knight. Understandable, always get your bits out at the board. Now we see bishop g4, and again, d4, good move. Usually speaking, if you can liberate a backwards pawn in these kind of structures, you'll be doing all right. Then this one's free to run like Forest. But Jan goes h3, very keen to take control of g4 and i4. We see captures on f3, knight recaptures, and Magnus hops in. It creates a tactical threat, and that's why Jan goes king h2. Now if the knight takes, you can recapture with the king, not the pawn on h3, and therefore the knight will never be loose. And this is an interesting moment. The game now shifts completely because Magnus could go a6, take care of the pawn, then bring the rook into the game. You could even technically do it immediately and gambit a pawn for activity. Go after this one, right? But he doesn't do either. He instead pushes b6 here, and it completely changes everything after A-B testing, because now we don't see takes on b6, playable, but then you run into this rook slide and the b pawn drops. It's a different game. This one's still covered, but instead we see rook takes on a8. Magnus captures on c5, and Jan takes the second rook. He gives the queen. What an incredible fight we've got now, because you've got queen worth 9 points, worth 2 rooks, against 2 rooks, sorry, worth 10 points. Which is better here? Well, Magnus shows us why the queen has to now work with open files, because first Jan takes care of that d3 pawn. In a closed structure, the rooks are going to really start dominating, but that's why queen d6, and it looks to now rip open lines. Now you have to defend this pawn here, but how to do it? Jan drops back. Why not this one? Well, it looks really scary after knight e6, interrupting the communication, and the knight is pinned to the king. Apparently you can tiptoe your way down this line, get away with it, this kind of thing, and the game goes on from here. But very difficult to determine this, low on time. Still this one's pinned. What's the next move? Rook takes c6, queen takes, knight g4 check. Apparently this leads to a draw. I mean, this is just bonkers. You don't go for this, right? Walking into a self-pin. So Jan drops back with knight e1, covers d3 here, and Magnus explodes the board with c4. Why is it so good? Yes, you give a pawn, but you get the queen invasion. Double whammy here on those two. The king steps back, the queen takes here. The line's opening up. It's what the queen thrives off. Exposed king, uncoordinated pieces. Rook c8's now played though, going for that one. Magnus drops back and covers, hits the rook here, slides over to d8. Now we see queen b4, hitting that pawn, and Jan re-enters the game with the knight, saying take on c4. No worries, I'll take on e5, but he doesn't do it correctly. What's the problem here? It's a recurring theme.
Mushrooms.
You can see stock squid poop its pants, queen c1 check. King goes, and then you've got this lovely creeping move, queen to f1, and you threaten checkmate in one. How to cover it? Rook g3, of course, but then there's knight e2. Hit here, threaten mate here, so you have to cover with the knight like this, and then you could take, or even stronger is taken here, and white's just collapsing. The king's getting ripped open, the rook's completely stuck offside. This queen and knight, epic attacking force. You cannot go for this. So Jan doesn't touch the pawn. Instead he plays this creeping move to pressure the black king, but now Magnus checks. We see a couple of repetitions. Does he want it? No, he doesn't. Magnus wants to play on, and it's so interesting. Psychologically, you deny an opponent's repetition and a draw, which probably Jan was going for there. Next move, they blunder, right? They can't handle the pressure, crack like an egg. What do we see Jan do? Not the right move, which was rook c7 or rook d2, just trying to hold steady, but knight g5. Goes for the aggressive counterplay, so understandable in Blitz, but not best, because check, king h2, the exact same theme that we discussed earlier on. And again, if you go for this and this and this, then black's killing it. We already discussed this. And that's why Jan doesn't go rook g3 here. He plays the best. Rook takes here with check. The king steps back, and now he gives up an exchange. At least therefore gaining a pawn and a knight for the rook, and gaining an exposed king against Magnus. But you're in some trouble. You know, this is a critical tempo, dislodging the rook. You can't get the passer going. Many squares the rook could slide to. Jan tries this, going for the pawn, but h6, knight e6, and g5. Magnus sets up the cemento pawn chain. White is struggling. The pawn pushes. Magnus re-enters the game with the queen. The knight saves itself, hits the pawn, tries to run the e-pawn, but it's no good. Magnus centralizes the black widow spider, 8 legs sprawling in every direction. Knight b7, the pawn drops. By the way, the top engine line there was to just sacrifice the knight with knight takes on c6, but it's hopelessly lost now. We see king g1, The c-pawn starts running, this king stepping back, Magnus on the march, the rook tries to activate, but he runs into a discovered check, Jan that is. If you do g3, well the queen's invading, it's absolutely horrendous, you just can't cover, this is a sample mate. So coming back here, the king steps back, you could already check, but instead Magnus goes for the material, this knight now saves itself in just a moment after the check, but still, we see more checks and the queen comes in, threatening mate in one. Yes, Jan can chuck in some spite checks, but it's really all it is. Because after the king sidesteps, now where are you going? How are you checking? What are you doing? Jan tries this one just to stave off the mate, but the queen takes with check and he resigns the game. You've only got one square, and here's a simple finish. Queen e1 check, the king goes, you pick up the knight, the rook's about to drop, this one's even covered, sure you can save it, but it doesn't matter, the pawn is marching, right? That is how the game ended with queen f2 check, and Magnus then went on to win 2, Jan won 2, excuse me, and they made about 3 draws, right? And we had this very strange finish where Magnus and Jan decided to be co-champions, approved by FIDE at their request. There's a whole story around that one. I'll link the game on screen if you want more details. Thanks very much for watching this one. Do subscribe if you enjoyed, and I hope to see you again soon. Cheers.